Hello everybody, it's Julia here from the Highly Sensitive Tarot, and today I'm back with another instalment from the series Top Tarot Trumps, started by the lovely Mascha at Musings by Mascha. And this is video number 9, I think, and this is card number 8 of the Major Arcana. And I know Mascha did a little poll and people voted for Justice, excuse me, to be card number 8, which I'm going to go along with today. I've picked 5 Justice cards, but for me, I'm a 100% Rider-Waite-Smith girl. It was what I was taught sort of 30 odd years ago. It's what I've learned. It's what I've always known. And for me, card number 8 is the Strength card. Card number 11 is the Justice card. But it doesn't really matter, does it? You know, I would still be picking the same cards and saying the same things about the cards, whether they're number 8 or number 11. So it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to fit in with everybody else and show you my Justice cards for today. So I've picked 5, and actually they were really easy for me. I think, although I wouldn't say Justice is a favourite card of mine, it is a card that has a big impact on me, I suppose. I'm quite big on justice. I'm quite big on fairness. I like balance. You know, justice is ruled by Libra astrologically, and I have a lot of Libra in my birth chart. I also have autism and was undiagnosed for a long time. So for me, things being fair has been a big theme in my life, a lot of my life, because a lot of the time things haven't felt very fair, really, just because it was difficult for me to get understanding about the things that I needed. So things often felt unfair for me, and it's just a subject I have a great interest in, really. You know, when I worked, my career was in mental health. I was also a homelessness advocate for a long time, and it causes me a lot of upset and a lot of distress at just how unfair and unjust the world can often be. You know, we see and hear things on a daily basis that are just not fair and just not just. And the world, it's difficult in this world to have things feel fair and in balance, isn't it? So yeah, this card means quite a lot to me, really. To me, I think justice is about a sort of more objective balance. It's not necessarily something that, perhaps it shouldn't be something that necessarily comes from your feelings. It should be a more objective, reasoned kind of force, I suppose. You know, I think I was trying to think about what justice means to me, you know, when we really get down to the crux of it. And I think for me, it's about consequences, you know, because when things aren't fair, when things have gone wrong, there are always consequences for people, for the perpetrator and the victim of any kind of crime, for anything really. There's always two sides, and there's always consequences for everybody, whether that consequence comes about immediately or it takes its time. There's always consequences. For instance, you know, the Justice card can come up in a reading, and it could tell the querent that, you know, if you're going to continue to keep up with your various addictions, if you're going to continue to smoke and drink and overeat and not take care of yourself, that there might be consequences to your health. I think it will tell the querent really whatever is necessary to bring their life and their selves back into balance. It's not always the nicest of cards. You know, I think in a more mundane sense, this card could signal a court case or legal undertakings. anything to do with justice in that way. And as I said, it's not always the nicest of cards, but it's a card that's always trying to balance things out and be wise and fair and just. I also think that as card number 11, it's a good card because I think in the first 10 cards of the Major Arcana, we're much more focused on the physical world. And as we move into the next 10 cards, we're getting more into the kind of metaphysical world. And I think Justice is a good card to kind of usher you into those next 10 cards. And I think for me, it kind of talks about personal justice as well. I think the Wheel of Fortune card can often relate to universal themes, universal karma, universal justice and balance. But the Justice card is more about personal or societal justice and balance. And so it's maybe about balancing your hopes and fears, or your drives, or your urges against your morals and your higher self and what you know to be correct, your conscience maybe even. So in its higher realms, it's really about truthfulness, fairness, judgment, you know, maybe even like lifting the veils of deception and illusion and finding out the truth of things. In its lower realms, it's a very, very different thing. You know, it could be about taking the law into your own hands, about overanalyzing, doubting yourself, false accusations, bigotry, intolerance, unfairness, and even things such as vengeance and retribution and revenge. So yeah, I think the Justice card, I really enjoy the Justice card actually, because I think it's a card that really prompts you to ask questions of yourself and to seek those kind of answers through having an open growth mindset. I've always tried to have a growth mindset, an onwards and upwards kind of mindset, and I think Justice is a really helpful card to help prompt those things. So let's have a look at my first card, and this one, I don't know whether you recognise the card. It's from the Pensive Path Tarot, one of my absolute favourites, and this card is really very definitely showing us the darker side of justice. You know, this woman here, this card makes me laugh. I don't know whether that's a good thing or not, but it really does. This card here is showing this woman who's about to drive a big nail or a stake into this man's head. And I don't know what artwork this comes from. I have the feeling it's something famous that I can't quite recall at the moment, but this really is vengeance, isn't it? You know, this man has obviously done wrong by this woman in some way, and she's seeking her own personal justice here. You know, she's taking the law into her own hands. And you know, depending on where you live in the world, depending on what sort of society you live in, depending on your own personal values and morals, some people might consider that this kind of act is just. You know, for many of us, this is a horrific act, but for some people in the world, this might actually be justice. You know, these are very individual decisions, aren't they? I would say that this decision has not been made out of reasoned, objective thought processes. This is a reaction. This is a distressed reaction, isn't it? This is a person in pain that wants to act out and lash out and seek their own revenge and retribution. And who are we to judge such things? You know, when you look at this card, we don't know what the man has done. You know, if he's done something that terrible, maybe he deserves this. Do you know what I mean? It's a very, who are we to judge with such things? But this is certainly the darker side of justice, isn't it? So that's my card number 1. My card number 2, which you will all know, I'm sure, from the Tarot of the Abyss. This is my absolute favourite justice card ever. My absolute favourite. I just love it. As soon as I opened this deck and looked at it, I just was drawn to this card. Her eye there, the way she's looking, the expression on her face. She knows everything. You know, it's like she can see into your soul. She will know the truth of things. And I kind of look at this as being like my conscience, you know, my higher self. This is me looking back at myself, you know, and judging myself really for whether I've been fair, whether I've been just, whether I've used reasoned thought, or whether I've just acted out of some impulse, you know. So I absolutely love that. Let me just read a little bit from the book, because Anna's words about the cards in the Tarot of the Abyss are just fantastic. So she's written here, justice is fierce but fair. She holds the scales of positive and negative forces with her eye, constantly scrutinizing and weighing our decisions. Yet still she stands, staring straight into our eyes, looking deep into our soul. Justice can see the most hidden of our intentions. She can sense if our choices and actions are based on truth or deception. In a sense, she represents our inner voice of reason and conscience. So it's like I said, isn't it? I very much see her as being like my conscience. She knows no grey area. Her judgment is stark and absolute. However, remember that unlike us, she can see the bigger picture. You only have one chance to present your case before her, so make it count. When justice appears, know that all will be revealed for better or worse. Everything hidden will make its way to the surface. This card can indicate legal proceedings or lawsuits, and one way or another the truth must come out. If you have been wronged or you have wronged someone else, justice will prevail. All will be judged for their actions, so act responsibly and be honest with yourself and others. And I think that's the point of this, isn't it? Is that, you know, this is about personal responsibility, about holding yourself accountable for your actions and for the consequences of your actions. It is a harsh card in many ways. And talking about harshness, that brings me on to my third card. And I just yesterday watched Tampi. I'm sorry if I've said your channel name wrong. Tammy at Tampi, I think your channel is. I may have got that wrong. I'm sorry. But I really enjoyed watching your video yesterday. And I saw that you'd drawn this card from the Game of Thrones tarot. And this was already in my list to choose for myself, because this is Ned Stark from Game of Thrones, and he was a very responsible person. He was a person who his own responsibility for his own position as kind of king of the north and being a ruler, he took his responsibilities very, very seriously. He also became the hand of the king, and so his whole purpose was about dealing with justice and the rights and wrongs of the daily affairs, really, of his subjects and the subjects of the king. And I remember in Game of Thrones, I think in the very first episode, where someone deserted from the Night's Watch, and Ned Stark cut his head off himself. You know, he took that responsibility and that burden upon himself to kind of deal out the consequences of this man's action. So, you know, he very much took his responsibility, his own personal responsibility for things very seriously. in a very harsh way, you know. But I guess in Game of Thrones, if you're a king or a queen or something, that's kind of how it is, isn't it? My next card is a little bit lighter. It comes from this deck, which is the Mystical Cats Tarot, and I've always loved this card. This just makes me smile. This is so funny, because I think what's going on in this card is this cat has, in its frenzy of sort of that drive to kill and to play with its little victim there, the bird. I don't know actually if there is a bird caught up in all this, or whether it's just string and leaves and flowers and bits and pieces. I think there's feathers and all sorts in here. But this cat, in its frenzy of play, has got itself all tangled up in the string. They are the consequences. That's the name of this card. Card number 11 is consequences. And the cat has become entangled completely in this string because there's been no reasoned thought here, has there? This has all been impulse. This has all been the impulse to kill, the impulse to play, the abandonment of this cat to any kind of reason or thought. Not that cats can reason and thought in the same way as us, but, you know, if this was a person, this person would have just got lost in the act and lost in what they were doing, and then would suffer the consequences of that, wouldn't they? Of this cat may have to walk around for some time trailing this string behind it because it can't untangle itself. That just makes me laugh. That's all that one is. And then the last card I've got here is from this deck, which I don't know whether you recognise. This is the Book of Shadows, Volume 2, I believe. And again, I really like this card because this again is a very clear image of consequences. I think if I remember rightly in the book, it said that this woman has come home late at night. We can see it's dark outside. She's come home late at night. She might have been at work all day and then been out partying in her high heels, and she's come home and her feet hurt. It's really as simple as that. That's the consequences of what she's done. And we all have to make those judgment calls, don't we? We all have to decide whether the consequences that we're going to receive are worth the thing that we want to do. And really, we need to try and do that in a more detached fashion, in a more reasoned fashion, in less of an impulsive or emotional way. Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that, you know, it's not worth going out and dancing all night, you know, that it's not worth having the sore feet, because I've done that plenty of times in my life, as I'm sure many of you have. But this is just a very simple image of consequences, isn't it? Yet again, is that sometimes we have to appreciate that in order to do something that we want to do, there will be a consequence, because life is always trying to balance itself out in some way. For every action, there is a reaction, isn't there? It's that kind of thing. I don't think I'm explaining it very well, but I'm sure from this image you can see exactly what I mean about consequences. Some consequences are very small and they're very worth it, and others are much bigger, like this one. The consequences for this, you know, whatever this man has done, he's about to face very, very serious consequences for that. And if she does indeed cave his head in and stab him with this big nail or this spike or whatever she's got in her hand, there may well be consequences for her that are very serious. She might get locked up forever. She might be put to death herself. And really, I guess that's her decision to make for herself, isn't it? Is whether that cost is worth the action there. I think all of these cards are just brilliant, really, different sort of representations of what justice means. Like I said, it's about a balancing, it's about personal responsibility, it's about being able to kind of balance out and work out whether our hopes and fears or our drives and urges in life are balanced against our morals and our higher self and our conscience and what we know and believe to be right. So there we go. I hope that made sense, and I hope that you enjoyed seeing my cards. I've really enjoyed seeing everybody's choices just recently, and I'm still really enjoying this series. I look forward to, we've got the Hermit next, haven't we? My favourite card in the entire deck. So yeah, so I hope everybody's well, and I will see you all soon.